The wind howled through the trees like a distant scream. I was alone in a small, run-down cabin deep in the woods, miles from the nearest road. The place smelled like old wood, damp and slightly rotted, mixed with the faintest scent of smoke from the fireplace. It was supposed to be a peaceful retreat, somewhere to escape from the noise of life for a weekend. But something felt wrong from the moment I arrived. The cabin itself was basic. A single-room structure with an attached kitchen, a narrow hallway leading to a small bathroom, and a bedroom with a bed that felt more like a wooden plank covered in fabric. There was no Wi-Fi, no TV, and barely any cell service. Just me, a few books, and the dense forest stretching for miles in every direction. The first night passed uneventfully, though I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The wind outside picked up after midnight, rattling the old windows and groaning through the trees like a warning. I had double-checked the doors, making sure the rusty lock was secure before forcing myself to sleep. By the second day, the unease had settled into my bones. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I spent the morning chopping wood, stacking it beside the fireplace, and boiling water for instant coffee. The sound of my own movements reassured me, made me feel like I was in control. But every so often, I'd glance at the window, expecting to see something looking back at me. There was never anything there. It wasn't until I took a walk that I noticed something was really off. The woods were too quiet. No birds, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. Just the crunch of my own boots on the frozen ground. It was as if the whole forest was holding its breath. I spotted something in the distance, a shape barely visible between the trees. A deer, maybe, but when I looked again, it was gone. I turned back to the cabin, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. The sky had darkened, and the temperature had dropped significantly. I felt it in my fingers, in my face. I walked faster, then faster still until I was nearly running. When I reached the door, my hands shook as I fumbled with the lock. Inside, I felt stupid. Nothing had happened. Nothing was out there. I was just on edge because I wasn't used to being alone in a place like this. I made dinner, canned beans and some stale bread, before settling in for the night with a book. Then I heard it, a sound from outside, not the wind, something more deliberate, a rustling, followed by a soft thump, like someone stepping onto the porch. My stomach twisted, and I held my breath, straining to hear. Nothing. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to relax. But just as I did, there was another sound, a quiet scrape, like something dragging against the wooden planks of the porch. My mind raced. An animal? A bear? No, bears wouldn't approach a cabin like this. I reached for the old hunting knife I'd found in the kitchen drawer earlier, gripping it tightly. Minutes passed. Silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. Finally, I forced myself to move, creeping toward the window beside the door. The porch was empty. The relief was short-lived. As I turned away, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. Something dark at the edge of the tree line. My breath hitched, and I stared, heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't a deer. It wasn't a bear. It was a shape tall, human-like, but wrong. The moment I focused on it, it shifted, stepping back into the darkness of the trees. I locked the door, checked it 3 times, pulled the curtains closed. Every shadow in the cabin felt sharper, more alive. I barely slept that night, lying stiff under the blankets, listening. Morning came, but the unease remained. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a hiker lost in the woods? But no hiker would be out there in the middle of the night, standing at the edge of the trees like that. By midday, I made a decision. I wasn't staying another night. I packed my bag, grabbed my keys, and stepped outside. The air was colder than the day before, heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine. The woods still felt wrong, like I was being watched. I forced myself to walk toward my truck, trying not to look at the trees. Then I saw it. Footprints, leading up to my cabin. Human footprints, deep in the mud, circling the cabin before disappearing into the woods. My chest tightened. My own tracks were there too, but these were fresh. Someone had been out there, watching me, I didn't hesitate. I got in my truck, started the engine, and drove. The tires spun in the mud before catching, and I sped down the dirt path, my hands gripping the wheels so tight they ached. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest town, where I checked into the first motel I found. I never went back for my things. I didn't care. Whatever had been out there, it wasn't just my imagination. It wasn't the wind. It was real, and it had been watching me the whole time. I never should have come here. I know that now, but it's too late, and all I can do is try to keep my hands steady as I write this down. If someone finds this, at least they'll know what happened to me. Started as a weekend away, a chance to clear my head, breathe some clean air, and get away from the noise of the city. I found a listing for a cabin deep in the woods, miles away from the nearest town. It wasn't fancy, but it had the essentials: a wood stove, a well, a small generator for electricity. I packed light, a duffel bag with clothes, a hunting knife I kept for protection, and a week's worth of food. I figured I'd spend my time hiking, reading, and enjoying the quiet. The drive was long, the roads twisting through dense forest, narrowing as I got closer to my destination. By the time I arrived, the sun had dipped below the treetops, casting long shadows across the clearing where the cabin stood. It looked just like the photos, small, rustic, with a slanted roof and a front porch that sagged a little. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. No cell service, no neighbors, just silence and trees stretching endlessly in every direction. The first night was uneventful. I made a simple dinner on the propane stove, cracked open a beer, and read by the dim glow of a lantern. The only sound was the occasional rustling outside, probably deer moving through the brush. I slept deeply, the kind of sleep that only comes when you're far from everything. The second day, I decided to explore. I followed a narrow, overgrown trail behind the cabin, winding deeper into the forest. I lost track of time, the dense canopy making it hard to tell how late it was. When I finally turned back, the light was already fading. I walked faster, but the trail seemed unfamiliar. Had I taken a wrong turn? I tried to retrace my steps, but everything looked the same: trees, moss-covered rocks, tangled underbrush. Panic gnawed at the edges of my mind. I forced myself to stay calm. I had to be close. I picked a direction and kept moving, hoping I'd spot something familiar. Then I saw it, a figure in the distance, partially obscured by the trees. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't moving, just standing there watching. "Hello!" My voice sounded small in the vastness of the forest. No response. My heart pounded. Could have been a trick of the light, shadows playing with my eyes. I took a step closer and it vanished. I ran. Branches clawed at my arms, my boots slipping on damp leaves. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop until I saw the cabin's roof peeking through the trees. I stumbled onto the porch, slammed the door behind me, and locked it. My hands were shaking as I grabbed the knife from my bag. I listened. The wind whispered through the trees, but nothing else. No footsteps, no movement. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I was just tired. That's what I told myself. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every sound made my skin crawl. The creak of the wood, the rustling outside, the distant hoot of an owl. I kept the knife within reach, my fingers wrapped around the handle. Hours passed. Then 3 sharp knocks on the front door. I froze. The sound echoed through the small cabin. Someone was out there. Someone had followed me. My breath came in shallow gasps. I didn't move. The knocks came again, 3, steady, deliberate. I gripped the knife tighter. My mind raced. There were no other cabins nearby, no reason for anyone to be out here. Silence. Then footsteps, slow and heavy, circling the cabin. My skin prickled. They stopped near the window. I didn't dare look. The lantern cast just enough light to make my shadow dance on the walls. If I moved, they'd see. I stayed still. Minutes passed. An eternity. Then nothing. No more footsteps. No more knocks. Just the sound of my own ragged breathing. I didn't sleep. When the first light of dawn broke through the trees, I forced myself to move. My muscles ached. My head throbbed. I stepped outside, scanning the clearing. No footprints. No sign anyone had been there. It didn't make sense. I wanted to leave. I should have left. But stubbornness, or maybe pride, made me stay. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, that I was overreacting. I spent the day close to the cabin, keeping my knife on me at all times. I didn't venture into the woods again. That night, the knocking returned. Louder this time, more insistent. 3 knocks, then silence. I held my breath. The footsteps circled again, slower, almost taunting. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the lantern and threw open the door, knife in hand. Nothing. The clearing was empty. The trees stood still. I stepped onto the porch, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then I saw them. Deep scratches on the door, long and deliberate, as if made by something with claws. But they weren't random. They formed words. Leave now. I didn't pack. I didn't think. I just ran to my car, heart in my throat. The engine roared to life, tires kicking up dirt as I sped down the narrow road. I didn't look back. I drove until I saw signs of civilization, until my phone buzzed with signal, until I could finally breathe again. I don't know who or what was out there. I don't want to know, but I'll never go back. And if you ever find yourself alone in a cabin deep in the woods, and you hear 3 knocks in the night, don't open the door. I don't know if I'll ever be able to sleep right again after what happened at the cabin. I don't even know where to start. It still feels like a nightmare I haven't woken up from, but I know it was real. My hands still shake when I think about it. My chest tightens. Every sound in my house now makes me jump. I rented the cabin because I needed a break from everything. I wanted to be alone. Work was burning me out, and I felt like I had no control over my life. My friends were all busy with their own things, and I didn't feel like dealing with anyone. I just wanted silence. A few days in the woods, no emails, no traffic, no people. Just peace. The place was a simple 1-bedroom cabin deep in the woods, about 30 miles from the nearest town. It had no Wi-Fi, no TV, and only the bare essentials. The owner told me there was a radio for emergencies, but I didn't think I'd need it. There was no cell service, which was the point. I wanted to disconnect. I got there in the afternoon. The drive was long and winding. The road getting narrower the deeper I went into the forest. By the time I arrived, the sun was already getting low, casting long shadows through the trees. The cabin looked exactly like the pictures. Small, made of dark wood, with a tiny porch and a single rocking chair. The inside was just as simple. A kitchen with a small table, a living area with a fireplace and an old couch, and a bedroom with a queen-sized bed. There was a bathroom too, but the water came from a well, and I was told to be careful with how much I used. I unpacked, made some coffee, and sat on the porch for a while, watching the trees sway in the wind. It was quiet, too quiet. I thought I'd enjoy the silence, but it felt unnatural. I grew up in the city, where there's always some background noise. Out here, the only sounds were the occasional rustling of leaves or the distant call of an animal. I shook it off, reminding myself that this was what I wanted. That first night, I slept lightly. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind outside, woke me up. At one point, I swore I heard something walking outside, but when I looked through the window, there was nothing, just darkness and trees. I told myself it was probably a deer or something. I forced myself to go back to sleep. The second day was uneventful. I spent most of it hiking the trails nearby, enjoying the fresh air. I found a small stream and sat by it for a while, just listening to the water. For the first time in a long time, I felt calm. I felt like I had made the right choice coming here. That feeling didn't last long. That night, I woke up to a noise. It wasn't the wind this time. It was something else, a soft tapping. It took me a second to realize it was coming from the window by the kitchen. It was slow and deliberate, not like a tree branch brushing against the glass. It sounded like fingers. I didn't move, My heart was pounding so hard I thought whoever was out there could hear it. The tapping continued. I wanted to convince myself it was an animal, but deep down I knew better. Animals don't tap on windows like that. I lay there for what felt like hours, barely breathing. Eventually, the tapping stopped. I listened for footsteps, but I heard nothing, just silence. It took me a long time to fall back asleep. The next morning, I checked outside. There were no footprints. The ground was covered in dry leaves, and they hadn't been disturbed. That didn't make sense. I told myself maybe it had been the wind somehow, maybe a loose branch, but I knew I was lying to myself. I considered leaving, but I had paid for 3 nights, and I didn't want to admit that I was scared over nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid. I tried to go about my day as normal, but the unease never left me. I kept checking the windows, looking for movement in the trees. I didn't see anything, but I felt like I was being watched. That night, it got worse. I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the porch. My stomach turned to ice. I stayed completely still, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped, and then I heard the doorknob turn. It was locked. Thank God I had locked it. Whoever was out there didn't try to force it. They just stood there. I could feel them. I could sense their presence even though I couldn't see them. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the footsteps moved away. I stayed awake until the sun came up. The moment it was light enough, I packed my things. I didn't care about getting my money's worth anymore. I needed to leave. As I was loading my bag into my car, I noticed something on the porch. A single, small rock, placed right in front of the door. I don't know why, but that scared me more than anything else. It was intentional, deliberate. It meant something, though I don't know what. I didn't stick around to figure it out. I drove away as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I was back in town, surrounded by people. Even now, weeks later, I can't stop thinking about it, about whoever was out there, about what they wanted, and about how they knew I was alone. I should have known better than to go alone. A cabin in the middle of nowhere, deep in the forest, miles away from any help. People disappear in places like this, but I told myself I needed the space, the quiet. My life had been a mess of stress, and this trip was supposed to clear my head. The drive out took hours, and the farther I went, the more I questioned my decision. The road narrowed to a dirt path, winding through thick trees, my tires kicking up dust as I went. The cabin sat at the end of it, small and isolated, surrounded by towering pines. It was old but sturdy, the wooden exterior worn by years of wind and rain. The only sound was the rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of some unseen bird. Inside, it was simple wooden walls, a fireplace, a small kitchen with just the basics. The air smelled of dust and old wood. There was no electricity, just an old generator outside, and no signal on my phone. That was fine. I wanted to disconnect. The first day was uneventful. I settled in, unpacked, chopped some wood for the fire, and made dinner. As the sun set, the cabin filled with deep shadows, the kind that made you second-guess what you saw out of the corner of your eye. I told myself it was just the unfamiliar setting playing tricks on me. By the second night, things felt off. I woke up around 2 a.m. to a sound outside. It wasn't an animal. Animals scurry. They move unpredictably. This was slow, deliberate. Footsteps. I sat up in bed, holding my breath, listening. The steps stopped near the window. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a branch falling. Maybe my imagination. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I stayed awake until dawn, axe beside me, every noise sending chills down my spine. That morning, I searched outside. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling. My instincts screamed at me that something was wrong. I decided to leave that day, but my truck wouldn't start. The engine turned over, coughed, and died. Over and over. I checked under the hood, but I wasn't a mechanic. It didn't make sense. It had been fine the day before. I was stuck. That night, the footsteps came back. Closer this time. I sat in the dark, listening. Slow, deliberate steps circled the cabin. I held my breath. The sound stopped near the door, then a soft tap against the wood. Not knocking, just a touch, testing. I gripped the axe, my hands sweaty. Minutes passed, then an hour. Nothing. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I checked again. Still no footprints. It was like whatever was out there wasn't leaving a trace. But I knew it was real. I forced myself to keep busy, to stop my mind from spiraling. I gathered wood, checked the generator. As I was outside, something caught my eye, something on the edge of the tree line. A shape just standing there, half hidden behind a tree. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. A man. He was far enough that I couldn't see his face, just his outline. He didn't move, just stood there watching. I turned to grab the axe from where I had left it near the porch. When I looked back, he was gone. No sound of movement, no sign he had ever been there. I ran inside and locked the door. My pulse was hammering. I wasn't imagining this. Someone was out there. That night, I barricaded the door with furniture and sat by the fire, axe in hand. The wind howled outside, branches scraping against the roof. I listened for the footsteps, but they never came. Just as I started to believe the worst was over, I heard something else. A faint noise from inside the cabin. The sound of breathing, not mine. Slow, steady, from the corner of the room. My blood turned ice. I gripped the axe tighter and turned my head, every nerve in my body screaming. The chair in the corner, the one I hadn't touched since arriving, was slightly moved. Someone had been inside. I didn't sleep, couldn't. At first light, I grabbed my bag, the axe, and a flashlight. I didn't care about the truck anymore. I was walking out of there. The trail back to civilization was rough, miles of dense forest. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves made my skin crawl. I expected at any moment to hear footsteps behind me, but I didn't. After hours of walking, I finally reached a road. A car passed and I flagged it down. An old man driving a rusted pickup stopped and asked if I was all right. I could barely get the words out. He gave me a ride into town. When I told him where I had been, he went quiet. Then, he just shook his head and muttered, "You're lucky." He didn't explain. He didn't need to. I never went back to that cabin. I don't know who or what was out there, and I don't want to.